Hello. So today we're going to be looking at Assimil Egyptian hieroglyphics with ease. And if you've ever wanted to learn ancient Egyptian and the hieroglyphics and everything, or the hieroglyphs I think it is in English. So if you've ever wanted to learn those and you like Assimil, that's like a dream come true. There's only one slight drawback, and that is that, as with many Assimil courses, it's only available in French. So if you're not really good with French, or you're not really familiar with the hieroglyphics, I would recommend not getting the book until you're a little bit more familiar with either one of those. Because even if you don't speak French, but you study like Middle Egyptian, which is, I believe, the form of Egyptian that's introduced in this book, and you already have some familiarity with hieroglyphs, and you already understand basically how they work and the grammar, the course is actually still usable. I've done that with other courses in Assimil where, I'm familiar enough with the language, even though that it's only in French, it doesn't really hold me back. I'm able to figure it out for the most part. And there's only a few areas that are kind of hard, but, it's still perfectly doable. So if you're not aware and you have interest in other, other ancient languages, Assimil does offer a couple more: Latin, Sanskrit, and Ancient Greek. And I think the Sanskrit one has kind of a similar background. As you can see, normally the Assimil courses look a little more like this little box, and they frequently put like a cute girl in one of them. And then, there's also this one. This is more of the older style, but this is a little bit different from the regular style. So those are the ancient courses they offer. Of those, though, I think Latin has been translated, into at least German, and I think a couple other ones. But we'll go ahead and start looking at the course here. So this is, I believe, 101 lessons, and I kind of appreciate the way Assimil introduces this. They give you a little bit of an introduction. They actually show you, this is kind of nice, right? They actually give you the writing, right? Here's the hieroglyphs, the hieratic, the demotic, and Coptic, right? So if you're not familiar with this, or you're not aware, Egyptian actually, and this is something I think they go over here too, Egyptian hieroglyphs, as you can see them here, were actually used for very formal or specific purposes, like the tombs and whatnot. The actual writing, the daily writing, kind of based on those, but was a smaller sampling of characters, was actually the hieratic, right? That was kind of like a cursive script, and that didn't involve, all of the hieroglyphs, which I think go up to about 6,000. There's Demotic, which was a later adaptation, and I think the grammar and everything a little bit different there. And there's Coptic, which is based off the Greek and the Greek writing system, the Greek alphabet. See if I can get that into focus. And it's a different language. The Coptic is the last form. It's barely spoken by anyone. After the Arab invasion, it kind of pushed the language back. So it's not really spoken by anyone anymore, except for the Christian community. And there's actually the Coptic Christian community, which is also has a fair amount of people, I guess, in the U.S. as well. So yeah, that's kind of the history of the language. It's pretty interesting. It's a very long history. And there's apparently quite a wealth of material that, if you learn this, you could actually read quite a lot in it. But, this is we'll go over the language proper. So, or excuse me, the language of this book proper, or this book. So they give you the transliteration, how it's pronounced, what the pronunciation is. And, there are a few different letters in here that have a couple of different marks that you might not be as familiar with, or because they're not quite as common. The H here has I think 4 different forms. The K has a couple. The S looks to have 3. 2 are the same, but so it's pretty interesting. Excuse me. It's pretty thorough in that. I guess if you're familiar with Arabic or Hebrew or anything, you'll know that they don't really write the vowels typically. Or at least in Hebrew, they don't write them typically. I think Arabic does now, although I'm not 100%. And I guess, unfortunately, that was the case with Egyptian, so I think they're not actually 100% familiar with how it was pronounced for sure in terms of vowels, right? Because, they don't really have those. Those weren't written. And so they get the consonants without the vowels. So as part of the transcription, what they do to help is they give you they put an E in between the vowels. So the mn, instead of being like min, it's men. You know, nifer is nefer. So, you know, they they help to make it easy to read. Let's see, they give you a little of the pronunciation, the transliteration, and they do use the weird letters here. I don't know, maybe there's a really good reason why they use these, but they do use kind of a heads up. These are the weird letters they use to transliterate this one and this one. I guess this one's pronounced like an ah, and this one's a long ah. So I don't know why they don't just write ah or use like a macron, but they do it that way. So yeah, the first 7 lessons here. Sorry, kind of the video is already at 5 minutes, and I've gone over the history and whatnot of the language a little bit more. Sorry. Yes, it's just a really cool course. So you can see the first 7 lessons are all pretty much like this. They give you information about it. They like the hieroglyphs, how they function. And they give you the explanation here. Here's the picture. It's an ideogram plus trait, or, it's an ideogram. If you're not familiar with Egyptian, the hieroglyphs had different, not only, the different pronunciations or usages, based on whether it was the meaning or whether it was for sound, because if it was for sound, it might not necessarily be used for the meaning of the word, and that might not matter. It's just being used for the sound, whereas other ones are used to give the meaning, but their sound isn't used, so they're not read, but it just adds meaning. So, so they explain that here. They give you the pronunciation, the list, and they give you the translation, and that's how it is for the first 7 lessons, as you can see here. You get that. Again, if you're already familiar with Egyptian, or have a fair amount of familiarity, this book is absolutely usable. Pretty much any course with Assimil is, because it's a translation. It's text. It's not just word by word or anything. So you can definitely pick it up if you have like a vocabulary list and book. It might be a little bit more challenging, but dictionary. So, and especially for the characters, the hieroglyphs. So the nice thing about Assimil on this one that I really, really like that they added here was they give you a writing exercise, actually, right? And if you can see here, these are really, really detailed in comparison. So they don't actually make you write out all the details. They just give you a much more simplified version, really, right? Some of them still have quite a bit of detail, but basically you trace over them, or draw something like that. That's to make it so that you remember it easier. It's a little bit more like the Chinese characters, the Japanese characters in that case. So to help you write it out, so it's not going to be exactly the same as the hieroglyphics, but it's to help with your memory and whatnot. So it's pretty cool that they actually added that in there to to help stimulate you that way, or to stimulate the learner. And let's see, let's get to Lesson 8, because that's where the texts actually begin. So we have Lesson 8 here, and the house is beautiful, the house is big, and then underneath it's just cool. They just house, beautiful house, and that's big house. So that's like the literal translation. So here's house. It's the name of the lesson. It's house. Line 1, nefer per, which is the house is a beautiful house, and then you have, I guess, per. So big house. So it's really cool that they go about it that way. And they even, nice here too, Assimil's cartoons. Again, if you're not familiar with Assimil, they have these little cartoons in here. They actually give you a little translation there, so that's kind of cool. And even the lessons, right? They give you the pronunciation plus the hieroglyphs, so they're very thorough in introducing this. They give you vocabulary basics after or bases after the end of the lessons as well. So you can see here's lesson 15. This is the vocabulary list afterwards. No, this is the exercise. Yeah, so this is the exercise. On the right here is some vocabulary. And There's the writing, let's say lesson 16, yeah, some more vocabulary, and then, more information. They give you notes. So it's a typical Assimil course. Every 7 lessons is like a review lesson. They give you more information and explain, how things functions. I believe, at least from my understanding, because I haven't made it that far into this book yet, but they actually do use legitimate texts from, quite a while back, obviously, but they actually do use some of the older texts, and I can't think of what they're called, but they're actually like, stories, actual Egyptian stories from way back, that were written, the hieroglyphs and whatnot, or, something like that, right? They introduced that, so you get to actually read like legitimate stuff, and so it's not just like what Assimil makes up. Let's see. Then afterwards, which is really, really nice too, is that after the 101st lesson, they don't always have this in all of the courses, but they do. In the case of the Egyptian course, they have grammar, and they give you, I think, a map and kind of stuff on there. Here's a verb table, perfect, accomplished, inaccomplished, and accomplished. So subjective, prospective, irregular verbs. Let's see, which is this one? Forme, verbe, fonction syntactique. So the syntactic chart. Numbers. Oh, and that's right, they do introduce this here. So here is the Coptic alphabet, and I don't know how much knowing Coptic helps with Egyptian, but I would assume it would help quite a bit since it is, related. It's the descendant language, as far as I understand it. So it's written with Greek characters. I think, the Greeks invaded Egypt, and then the Romans, and then the Arabs. And after the Arabs, that was when the language was no longer spoken. I guess, whenever they... Arabic is the main language of Islam and whatnot, so at least that's, as far as I understand it, that's why they don't, they converted to Islam, and, Arabic was the language that was used in that case, so, kind of like Latin in some cases where people stopped speaking, but it didn't affect, some people kept speaking their language, some people didn't, so unfortunately a lot of the Egyptians just kind of stopped, except for the Christians, so they do give you a vocabulary list here, bibliography. Map of where things are spoken, found, and hieroglyphs no less. That's pretty cool. This book is just really, really cool. I've always liked Egypt myself, so always, the ancient Egyptian stuff is always so interesting, right? So it's really cool to actually be able to see this, right? And they give you the list, right? So these are the determinatives. Those are the ones that give the word meaning, I believe, and they give you different combinations of the list. I'm not sure how many of the vocabulary or characters are introduced. Like I think I said at the beginning of the video, from my understanding, there's about 6,000 characters that they have, and total. I don't know how many of those are introduced, but they do give you, for example, men. Characters that are based on men, and each character has a very different meaning, different usage. It could be old man, walking man, king, things like that. So you can see here there's just like 55 different things revolving around guys. There's 7 for women, 20 for divinity, 28 for parts of the human. A lot of eyes. I don't know what it is with ancient world and eyes, but they always draw eyes a lot. So, yeah, each of them are a little bit different. So I'm not sure. I assume most of the readings, I think, are actually different, or there's specific uses. So that's kind of a downside. But yeah, there's, as you can see here, just a lot of vocabulary. So this is introduced, by the way, V, W, X, Y, Z, So it looks like they introduce it phonetically and then give you the, what's in there, the different types. In like the case A, I'm not sure if that's for pronunciation, but or if that's just how I'm not sure why they did it or the the ABCs that way, but index of signs. So they have a lot of ways to look it up and kind of figure it out. And there are lists actually, for Egyptian. So you should always be using something like this with another book, or with with other books. Not necessarily with another book, but you should always be using multiple books to learn a language. And here is the Lexicon Egyptian French. I think it's only Egyptian French. I don't think they have French Egyptian. Yeah, so it's only French Egyptian or Egyptian French. It starts at page 794 and ends on page. That page is not marked, so 844. So that's a fair amount of pages. So 845 actually. So that's at least 50 pages or so. So yeah, that is Egyptian hieroglyphics. If you're interested in the book, I highly recommend it. There are also audio CDs for this, if I'm not mistaken here. And let's see if it has it written on there. Yep, here we go. So there are 4 audio CDs for this. And if you're not familiar, Assimil, when they do audio CDs and whatnot, or they always, excuse me, when they do audio CDs, the audio discs and whatnot, the audio is always, I assume it's the case for this book as well, but it's always 100% in the language you're learning, right? So they don't, it's not like colloquial, or I think Teach Yourself does this too. Lesson 1, unit 5, blah, 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 something, 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 and then, I don't know what would be like, Ginko e ikimasu, like I'm going to the bank. I'm going to the bank. Marie and her friend, like that kind of a thing where it's, like half in English. They don't do that with Assimil, so, whatever amount of reading you get, I don't know if it says here, it doesn't look like they say it, but sometimes they'll tell you, I think like the Swedish one was 3.5 hours, the original Swedish one, for everything. Usually it's something like an hour or two, something like more than an hour. Let's see, the Chinese is 150 minutes. They don't write it for this one. Yeah, so that just gives you an idea, right? So it is available. There is audio, and I apologize for the length of this video. It's a lot longer than I meant to. I kind of got you guys talking a lot about the talking about a lot of different things about the language. So it's very fascinating. It's a very cool course. It'd be cool to see other it'd be cool to see other people, other companies make courses like this, other language publishing courses. Like colloquial or whatnot. It'd just be pretty interesting. So, if you're interested, that is the Assimil, the Egyptian hieroglyphics.